congressional district said, I say Democrat, he said one of the first words that he ever learned was Democrat around here, because around his household it was used more than any other word just about. His father was the former Congressman, 6th District, Jed Johnson Sr. Just a few points about Jed. He was a recipient of the presidential citation that was given to 15 high school graduates over the entire United States for outstanding service. He was a major in government at Oklahoma University. He was a student body president while he was there, and he was named one of the 3 outstanding senior men. He also was a national field representative for the American Association for the United Nations, as well as the president of the United States Youth Council. And presently, he has been nominated by the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce as a nominee for the 10 Outstanding Young Men. This is a nationwide undertaking by the Junior Chamber of Commerce. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce you gentlemen now, Jed Johnson. Jed? Can we put this down here someplace so I don't have to hold it? Well, no, she's going to have to stand. I'll do it. I just thought there might be some place to put it. Well, I feel like I'm, speaking to some mass audience out here with this microphone, and it feels a little strange. Hello out there in Neverland. Well, first let me thank you very much for having the chance to appear before you. I especially want to express to you my very real appreciation for changing your regular schedule meeting time. As I explained to Mr. McBee in my letter, I had to be at Elk City last night for their rodeo. They have about 10,000 people there, and I shook every hand as they went into the rodeo and rode in the parade there, and we didn't get away until this morning. So I do appreciate your moving your schedule from a breakfast meeting to a lunch meeting. I said up there at Elk City that I wanted to find out where Victor used to stand, and that's where I wanted to stand. So I stood out there in front where he used to. Dwight introduced me as a young man. I was amused last night at the Elk City Rodeo. One of the ladies who came in, I said, I'm Jed Johnson, I'm running for Congress. And she said, well, you are young, aren't you? And I was amused at the story that passed around. I was going to help in President Johnson's drive for economy and government spending because I could travel at half fare. But I enjoyed that anyhow. I understand, if I'm correct here, please advise me if I'm not correct, that this is very much of a political setting. I'm not speaking to a civic club, and so the ground rules of speaking partisanly are off. So I'm speaking to you now here as a Democrat who's proud to be a Democrat, who's proud of his heritage of the Democratic Party, and proud that he was brought up by a man who served in Congress from the state for 20 years. I speak to you as a Democrat who is concerned, a young Democrat concerned about the problems of our state, of our country, and our world. I personally reject emphatically the philosophy of Goldwaterism and extremism and the Republican platform. I noticed myself with some grave concern that whereas the Republican Party would condemn the nuclear test ban, the platform committee, and they would condemn the hotline, they refused to condemn extremism, and they refused to condemn by name the Communist Party, the Ku Klux Klan, and the John Birch Society. Well, I watched this on television and I was concerned. My philosophy does not fit this. I am a Democrat and I condemn extremism, whether it be the left or the right, the Communists, the Ku Klux Klan, the John Birch Society, and I believe very much in terms of a general political philosophy that I would identify most closely with President Johnson. A philosophy of moderation, a philosophy of trying to work together with all the people and be, in the terms of the president, everybody's president, and in terms of the congressman, everybody's congressman. We have in this country business and labor. We have many different interests. We have many different sections. In the same way in this district, we have many different interests. We have many different sections within our district, and I'm going to try and represent, if I am elected, which I feel I'm going to be, the entire district to the best of my ability, and all of the districts. I might mention at this point, one of the things I plan to do as a congressman is do what I did as student body president, the University of Oklahoma. And that was to send out a poll. We did it at registration, and about 9,000 or 10,000 students would fill out this poll of 20 or 25 issues confronting the student body at that particular time, getting their opinion on these issues. In the same way, I'm going to do what many congressmen do, and that's send out a poll to all the people of the district and try and get a reaction to the major issues confronting the Congress, especially the controversial ones, to use as a guideline. Because I believe very keenly in representative democracy. And I believe that this is the best way that I can represent the district. Because traveling throughout the district, I hear both sides of virtually every issue. Some people very emphatically for something, some people very emphatically against the same thing. And it's really a little hard to judge what the people really want. And I think the best way to do it is to give a chance for all the people to vote. And I'm going to try and use this poll as a guideline myself as a congressman. Now, I would like to just briefly go over 3 or 4 points that I listed on my platform to mention some specific things that I hope to work toward as a congressman. The first thing I listed was to get more industry and improve job opportunities for the 6th district. I'm very concerned that in the last 10 years, from 1950 to 1960, in the census, 19 of the 23 counties in the 6th district lost population, while the nation, of course, is booming. In Tillman County, if my memory is correct, the loss was 16.7% in that census. I am concerned throughout the district that we go to work to try and bring in new industry, especially the space-age industry, which is a new industry which, as you know, has this curve around from Cape Canaveral across the Gulf, around the Gulf of Mexico to Texas. And I know that space industry is moving into Texas, and it can move into Oklahoma. And I know that these things don't just happen. I worked in Congress for 3 years, and I know that a congressman who will go to work for his district and go and see business leaders with the senators from the state and go and encourage the heads of corporations to come to your district and see for themselves the opportunities that present themselves, and to see that the people want their industries to move in, that this can happen. And this is the first thing that I listed to do, was to try and bring new industry into the district. The second thing I would like to mention was to get the farmer a fair share of the national income. I'm very concerned that the farm parity is at an all-time low, and each month it continues to go down. People living in the rural areas are making approximately half of what people living in the non-rural areas of our country. And I think that this is a great tragedy, because after all, in the United States, we've had the farmers develop our economy to such a point that we in America spend only 1/6 of our national income for farm and food and fiber, whereas in the Soviet Union they spend half of their income, and in Western Europe they spend 1/3 of their income. So it's because of the great farm productivity that we've been able to develop so much economically in this country, and yet the farmer is getting worse and worse off. And I'm concerned to try and help preserve the family farmer and try and help the farmer get a fair share of the national income. The last thing I'll mention, because I want to leave a considerable time here for questions and answers, is that of internationally strengthening American leadership abroad. In my work with the United States Youth Council, I've traveled to over 25 countries, into Africa and Asia and Europe. I've had a chance to debate Russians in India, in West Africa. I've had a chance to see firsthand what is going on overseas. And I think the challenges that we confront internationally are very great. I might mention that the United States Youth Council was created after World War II to counter the International Communist Youth Organization. The U.S. Youth Council is composed of national organizations such as the National Newman Club, the Young Democrats, the YMCA, the YWCA, and so on. The council is sponsored by national foundations, and we send delegations throughout the world representing the United States youth, and bring delegations here to see our country firsthand, delegations of youth leaders from these other countries. And I feel that we face the greatest challenge probably that man has ever confronted. The United States, with its democracy in the last 188 years, has proven something that history has said could not happen, and that was that man was capable of governing himself. Man has been governing himself successfully in the United States. We have reached the highest standard of living, economically, of any people in the entire world, in the entire history of the world. More people have more and more freedom, in addition to the economics of it, than ever before. And I'm concerned that we preserve and strengthen and pass on this heritage, a heritage of freedom. We're dealing in an age which is unknown to man. 18 years ago, if you had said that atomic energy was going to come into existence in such proliferation that there would be the equivalent of 10,000 pounds of TNT in the Soviet Union stockpile and the United States stockpile for every man and woman and child in this room and in this world of ours. People would have thought you were insane. If you'd said 20 years ago that men would be going into orbit, astronauts going around the Earth, going to the moon seriously as spacemen, people would have thought this was insane. If you had said that all the technological revolution, the population explosion, the independence of all the new countries, if you'd predicted any of these changes that were going to take place and that the rate of acceleration would continue to increase, no one would have thought these things possible. In the same way, if you project 20 years from now, the population of the world will be doubling approximately in the next few decades. The problems that we confront are greater than ever before. We're living in an age which is unparalleled in human history because now we have the capacity to destroy man, to destroy life itself. And I believe very keenly in the freedom of the individual, in our free society, in our system of government, and I am concerned to go about the business of trying to help strengthen America and helping to strengthen the freedom that we believe in throughout the world. With that, I'll close. Thank you very much, and we'll go to questions.
Gentlemen, we'll ask if you have a question to please come up front and speak your question into the microphone. For your information, this tape will be rebroadcast tomorrow morning at 8:30 on the station. So if you have a question from the floor, will you please come forward and speak your question into the microphone at this time. Just right over here, anywhere. Dr. Joe Horton has a question.
I have several questions. In order to accept the nomination, you subscribed to and accepted the Democratic Party's platform. Is that not true?
Would you repeat that, please? I'm not.
I say that in order to accept the nomination that you're for Congressman, that you subscribed to the Democratic Party's platform.
Well, I did not write the Democratic Party platform, and there'd be certain things in it that I would word a good deal differently than the way it was written. But, of course, I am a Democrat, and basically I will say I reject the Republican platform and that the Democratic platform would come closer to my way of thinking. Yes, sir.
Well, is there any specific portion of this platform which you oppose?
Well, could you get to your question? I think, I'm interested in getting to your question.
I said...
The platform is a very long platform.
I said, is there any specific portion of the platform which you oppose?
There are many things that I would have worded differently. I didn't write the platform. I'm a Democrat. Of course, as a Democrat, I run on the platform. But this gets back to our system of government of compromise. It gets back to our parties, that you rarely get the whole loaf of bread. You often get half a loaf of bread, or sometimes you get a whole loaf of bread when you only want half the loaf. Now, I didn't write the platform, and I'm not going to stand up here and say that I agree that everything's in the platform. You ask me what I believe, and I'll tell you what I think. But don't ask me to say or commit myself to every word in the Democratic platform. I'm not prepared to do that. But I will say in general, I subscribe to it. In general, I reject the Republican platform as a platform of negativism, of nihilism, of know-nothingism, of people who want to go back and are not prepared to go forward. And I think the Democratic platform is prepared to move this country forward.
On March 18th, 1964, President Johnson stated that he planned to take from the haves and give to the have-nots. I'd like for you to comment on this.
I would assume that this is taken out of context. It sounds like something from A Texan Looks at Lyndon. President Johnson himself has got how many $1 million? We hear a great deal about the president having made so much money, so I don't know why he'd want to take from the haves and give to the have-nots. I think this is taken out of context. I would not subscribe to it. I would not agree with it. I'm sure that President Johnson does not agree to it.
It's been said and published that if Mr. Fred Harris is defeated, it will be because of his running mate, Lyndon Johnson. I'd like to comment on that.
Fred Harris is not going to be defeated. Lyndon Johnson is not going to be defeated. Lyndon Johnson, according to the latest polls that I've seen, the U.S. News and World Report, has a poll of 69.9% of the American electorate supporting him, and this is the biggest percentage that a presidential candidate has ever had going into the election. Now, I grant vote for Lyndon Johnson. They're not going to vote for Fred Harris, and most of them aren't going to vote for me. And we're prepared to accept this. But I am telling you that the people of this country are going to vote for the Democratic Party. The people of this country, the latest polls that I've seen in Arizona showing Barry Goldwater trailing in Arizona. And I would predict to you with all sense of surety that Lyndon Johnson is going to be reelected by the greatest margin probably since 1936. And I'm proud to be running on the same ticket with Lyndon Johnson. Let me say something else about Lyndon Johnson. Now, I worked in the Florida Senate for 3 years, and this is to the interest of especially the radio audience. If you had said 8 years ago, when I was up there working for Senator Monroney and Senator Kerr, that Barry Goldwater was going to be nominated President of the United States by a major party, people would have laughed 8 years ago. The only person that might have predicted that 8 years ago was Robert Welch in his Blue Book, which he did. And you can read it yourself if you haven't and see that he said Barry Goldwater is our man. The Republican Party is our party. Now, the fact of the matter is that 8 years ago when I worked on the Senate for 3 years on the floor there on the Senate and I watched the senators, Barry Goldwater was some sort of a joke. He didn't even vote with the Republicans. He stood off in a corner and no one paid any attention to him. He votes consistently and has voted consistently against everything. It's like Hale Boggs of Louisiana says, wouldn't it be awful to be a Republican nowadays? What could you be for? Now, this is the way I feel about it. Barry Goldwater is off and represents not only not the mainstream of the Republican Party, we have a great, an honored tradition of conservatism in this country and in the world. It stretches back even before the American Revolution of conservatism. But Barry Goldwater is not a conservative. He doesn't want to conserve things in this country. He is a reactionary. He wants to change everything and change. It's a fight against the old New Deal. It's a fight against the ghost of Franklin D. Roosevelt. They're trying to dismantle everything that's been done in the last 30 years. Now, when Franklin Roosevelt came into power, the gross national product of this country was $56 billion. Today it is over $650 billion. And this country has prospered more in the last 30 years than any country in the history of the world. And in the last 43 months, we have had consecutive economic prosperity, which is the first time in 100 years that we have gone for 42 months during peacetime with continued economic growth. We have in this country today more people employed, over 72 million, a higher gross national product, a greater rate of corporate profit, a greater rate of business growth, a greater rate of wages than any time before in our history. And I say to you that this nonsense, and I think it is nonsense, it's a know-nothingism of Barry Goldwaterism. I reject, I repudiate it, and I think we've got to move forward. We've been moving forward under the Democratic administration, and I want to see Oklahoma move forward as the rest of the country is moving forward more so. And let me say one more thing about Lyndon Johnson and the business support in Barry Goldwater. I'm speaking here to the Chamber of Commerce group. You gentlemen are all eminently successful businessmen. Well, maybe, Doctor, you missed it in the paper, but I certainly saw it. I saw it on TV. 46 of the top national business leaders in this country came out for Lyndon Johnson the day after the AFL-CIO endorsement. This is unheard of. 2 of these 46 members of this business group were people who had been in Eisenhower's cabinet. 2. And a large number of them, men like Henry Ford, have never voted for a Democrat before in their lives, and they never thought they'd live to see the day they were going to. Now, Lyndon Johnson is the friend of the businessmen of this country, and the businessmen know it. And he has the support nationally of the business leaders. And I think that speaks back to what I'm saying, that Lyndon Johnson has represented all the people, just as I want to try and represent all the people in all sections of the 650.
Have you been a member of the National Student Association?
Have I been a member of the National Student Association? When I was student body president at the University of Oklahoma, the National Student Association the University of Oklahoma was affiliated with the National Student Association, as were such schools as the University of Texas, Notre Dame, the University of South Carolina, Harvard, Michigan, Wisconsin, Stanford, California, Yale, all the best schools in the country. And I have attended the National Student Association Congress. I'm very glad you brought this up because this is one of a series of rumors I've heard about myself that I reject, I repudiate. And among other things I've heard, I say my favorite rumor. The other day I was in Duncan and I heard I was a member of the John Birch Society. I am not a member of the John Birch Society. I am not a member of the Communist Party. I am not a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I am against all form of extremism. I always have. I was elected student body president by the University of Oklahoma students. I served in the student government for 4 years, and I represented the University of Oklahoma at a large number of national congresses. Now, you mentioned NSA. I do not subscribe to all the things that happened at the National Student Congress, and I'm not going to stand here and defend them all. And I didn't defend them at the University of Oklahoma. My position was then, is now, that you are better off working within an organization trying to have your views set forth than to withdraw from it. At the first Congress I went to, among the people that spoke to us were George Romney, who was later to become governor of Michigan, Percy Bell, who is now running on the Republican ticket for the governorship of Illinois, and Robert Kennedy, who later became Attorney General. We had national leadership there, speaking to the national student government leaders. The National Student Association is composed of over 400 student governments throughout the country. And you can get information from the United States State Department, from the United States government, the United States President, whoever you like, and you will find that it is, and that it has been, and always has received the official approval of the United States government. And I don't like this type of innuendo. Have you ever been a member of such and such organization? Well, you don't have your facts right. And I reject this type of thing.
I'm sorry that you're opposed to being questioned this way. I feel that we should know all about you that we can if we're going to be asked to vote for you. I believe now, I may be wrong about this, but I have been led to believe that you were a vice president of the National Student Association.
That is completely wrong, Doctor. I have never served in any office of the National Student Association. I was president of the student body of the University of Oklahoma. I served the student government for 4 years. I received the Cross Citizenship Award at the University of Oklahoma, the Lex Freiser Medal, and was named one of the 10 outstanding senior men, one of the 3 outstanding senior men. And if you want to write George L. Cross, president of the University of Oklahoma, to find out about my record at the University of Oklahoma, I wish you would do so. But what irritates me is this type of thing that misinformation or misrepresentation that has taken place many times. I dislike being called a member of the John Birch Society. I just have very little sympathy with this kind of thing. I just like being accused of things that are not true, and I'd like for people to get their facts straight.
You can tell us what the National Student Association stand on the McCarran Internal Security Act of 1950 was.
Yes, and I would disagree with it.
Tell us.
The association, as I recall, voted against the act, or whatever, if this is correct, and I voted against the resolution passed at the National Congress. I'm not going to stand here or sit here and defend every act passed by that group or the University of Oklahoma Student Senate. I'm going to come back 2 years from now, having served in Congress for 2 years, and I'm not going to defend every act passed by the United States Congress. This isn't our system of democracy. Our system of democracy is majority rule. And I'm sure there'll be many things passed by the U.S. Congress that Lyndon Johnson's for that I'll be against. But there'll be many things that I'm for, and I'm not going to come back and say that because such and such was passed by the U.S. Congress that I'm prepared to say that I was for it. I may very well have been against it. If it was, I'm going to have to say, I'm sorry, Mr. President, but I don't believe this is in the best interest of my district. I can't personally support it, and in good faith, I have to vote against it. What I question, Doctor, and what I resent, because I've had quite a bit of this around the district in terms of misrepresentation, is the I guess you would say the inference. People questioning a man's good faith or questioning his intentions, and I'm prepared to disagree with you on any subject. This is the greatness of our system, is that we can disagree. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can not agree on a lot of things, but as Americans, we have differences of opinion, and we're prepared to try and negotiate these differences and try and work them out and try and have a majority rule. And what I am not prepared to accept is the type of innuendo that a man not only he's disagreeing with you, but his intentions, his motivation, his good faith is in question. I don't think this is Americanism. I don't think this is really America at its best. And what I repudiate and what I reject, the other day I met with the president of the John Birch Society in Duncan because he had spread some things about me that were not true. He said I'd been to Cuba in defiance of the State Department. Well, this is a lie. Of course I'd not been to Cuba in defiance of the State Department. If I'd been to Cuba in defiance of the State Department ban, I would have never run for Congress. This is totally absurd. A man doesn't spend his life savings trying to be elected to Congress to represent the people of the district. If something like this is true, and I went to the president of John Birch Society there in Duncan because I had been told by some people that he had told them this, and I said, look, I don't want your vote. I don't want your support. I'm not here to ask for that, but I'm here to ask you to get your facts straight. Please get your facts right. You can be for my opponent, you can oppose me, but can't we do it on facts instead of innuendo and things that are not correct? And this is essentially what I'm saying, is that I think that we have to be very concerned to see that people are not smeared. As President Johnson said in his acceptance speech, he rejected the fear and smear. And I hope, once and for all, when Barry Goldwater is defeated decisively as he is going to be, that the people who have been saying, give us a choice instead of an echo, give us a chance to have this choice, will realize that the great majority of the American people are pleased and are satisfied with the Democratic Party, that on the whole, that they support it and they reject this idea of going back into the Stone Age. They reject the idea of nihilism and of know-nothingism and just don't want to have any part about it.
Mr. Johnson, I want to ask you to keep your answers, please, as short as possible, and we have quite a few questions around, I think. Various people want to talk. Our time is limited. And the next questioner is David Gish.
Johnson, I've been primarily interested in education as an avocation in this community, and also on a state level and some extent on a national level. What is your viewpoint of federal aid to education?
Well, excuse me, I'm not an expert on this subject, as I'm not on a lot of subjects, and I don't profess to be, of course. In the U.S. Congress, as you know, there's a committee system that's set up, and the committees make recommendations to the entire Congress, and from these recommendations, you try to gain from all the study that each committee has done. Now, I haven't been on a committee. I haven't studied this specific issue in any detail. In general, I'm a strong supporter of education. I'm a strong supporter of educational opportunities for all our people because I think that this is the way we're going to develop our country. I think one of the greatest losses has been that so many people have not been given an opportunity for higher education. The percentage is something like 50% of valedictorians of high school classes that do not go on to higher education. I think this is wrong. There are many different aspects of federal aid to education. I would oppose any type of federal control, but I certainly would not necessarily oppose federal assistance in terms of to buildings and to helping the educational system. But I would be opposed to any type of control over that system or the curriculum.
Does anyone else have some questions you'd like to ask? Brother Mart Harden has some questions for Mr. Johnson this time.
While it is true that we have produced a gross national product of over $600 billion, it is also true that we have produced a $315 billion or thereabouts national debt with increasing deficit spending. Could you give us your viewpoint on deficit spending in the national government?
I'd like to add a couple of other figures to this question, which I think put it in a little better perspective. These are the Democratic figures. At the end of World War II, the federal debt was 114% of our gross national product. Today, the federal debt is 54% of our gross national product. So if you look at it in relative terms of what our country is producing, you will find that the federal debt has been cut in half in terms of the gross national product. Another interesting thing to look at is in terms of the federal employment. I always hear a great deal about how many federal employees there are, so I did a little research into this, and there are 2,400,000 federal employees. Now, you divide this out, and you find 1 million of them are in the defense establishment. You find that 600,000 of them are in the 30,000 post offices around the country, and 300,000 are working with the Veterans Administration. This is 1,900,000, which leaves approximately 500,000 left for all the other 80 government agencies working all around the country. And this is 100,000 less than American Bell Telephone alone. So I think that when you look at these two things and look at the fact that the federal debt has increased since World War II by 10%, and that the state and local debts, including the state of Oklahoma, have increased by over 400%, I think that this is out of perspective. Of course, I am not in favor in terms of deficit spending per se, but I'm not of the opinion that it is led us down the road to chaos, as some Republicans would have us to believe. I just haven't seen it. I'm not, again, an economic expert. I don't profess to be. I talked to Mr. Heller, who is the economic advisor to President Johnson when I was in Washington, and asked him this very question about federal debt, because I don't understand it. I'm sorry, I really don't. It's too complicated for me. But he explained to me that actually if the debt was taken away, there would be somewhat economic chaos because of the different, I guess it's banks and wealthy groups that buy bonds. He said that they would have no place to put their money, and he said actually it's a very interesting thing that if this was removed, it would result in chaos. But I'm just giving you his answer. I can't explain it any further. And I'm sorry I don't know more about economics, but I hope to learn.
Mr. Johnson, you made a reference yourself a few moments ago to something that you didn't fully explain, and in fact there's 2 or 3 different things I'd like to ask you about. You said something about you'd been accused of going to Cuba and doing a bunch of things there. Would you explain this so that we'll understand? We've heard a few of these rumors to which you refer. Now we want to know what your position is, whether you did go, when it was, under whose auspices, and what your impression of it was.
I'm glad you raised it. My trip to Cuba took place in 1959. I can say that I'm against Castroism, communism, fascism, or any other type of extremism. When I went to Cuba, the revolution there had just taken place. Castro had just come into power. The United States, of course, had diplomatic relations with Cuba. The Soviet Union did not either have diplomatic relations or commercial relations with Cuba. The U.S. government was sending technical aid and assistance to Cuba. My trip was made with 190 American student government leaders from throughout the country, people such as the student vice presidents of schools like Notre Dame and Texas. And we went with the complete approval, sanction, and authorization of the U.S. government. This is a very neat little rumor that was put out because, of course, people have read in the papers that communist student groups have been to Cuba in the last 2 years. Everybody's read about this. And the fact that I had been to Cuba in 1959, 5 years ago, and the fact that people have read about communist student groups having been to Cuba, it was a neat little thing that was put out, but it isn't going to work. It hasn't worked anyplace. So that's the.
Well, what did you do, and how long did you stay, and so forth?
Oh well, we spent a week there, and I think the great tragedy in my reaction to the whole situation in Cuba after having been there and having been to a lot of places is that the great tragedy of this is that under Batista, the dictator, before Castro took power, the people were fighting for an overthrow of the government, and they were fighting for freedom. I met with people who'd had their brothers or their sisters or their mothers or their fathers shot in this fight for freedom. They thought they were fighting to secure a representative government in Cuba. And many people gave their lives to overthrow this dictator in Cuba. And the great tragedy to me, the terrible compounding of the tragedy, is the betrayal. Because these people, most of the people who were fighting in the beginning, they were not communists. They were, many of them, very loyal Catholics and wanted to have freedom of religion. They wanted to have freedom in their own political government there. And, of course, all of this was betrayed. All of this was thrown away. And I think it's a terrible, terrible tragedy, and I hope that someday I will see a democratic regime in Cuba. I hope that I'll be able to see it.
A couple of the things that have been said today have kind of left me a little puzzled, too. It was mentioned at our table that you were about to be 25 years old at the time of your entry onto active service as a member of Congress. Yet, a while ago, you said something about 8 years ago when you worked with the Senate. According to my computation, you were 17 years old and giving some rather progressive opinions of that time. Would you tell us what you were doing 8 years ago?
Progressive opinions of that time?
For a 17-year-old boy.
Oh, wow. It's very simple. I had the lowest possible job that a 17-year-old boy can have, and that was I was a page. I was a page in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and a messenger. 8 years ago, I was probably a messenger on the Senate floor, and what I did essentially, in addition to showing people around the Capitol, and there are probably people here in Frederick that I've shown around the Capitol for Senator Monroney and for Senator Kerr, was to work on the Senate floor and bring the senators out when a lobbyist wanted to see a senator. I would go in and give the senator the lobbyist card, or if a newsman wanted to see the senator, I would go try and find the senator and bring him out. This was essentially my work the last year, and the 2 years before that was running all around the Capitol. But I had a chance to observe firsthand both the working of the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. And this is where I found that Barry Goldwater 8 years ago was not considered a likely prospect at all for anything. He was not considered presidential timber by the members of even the Republican Party at that time.
Mr. Johnson, back when, during the war, those of us who were in the service remember that we have constantly had to make re-estimates of the situation as things went on. And we know that the same is true probably of foreign aid. To my way of thinking, there are probably about 5 basic ways of looking at foreign aid. There are some who are just absolutely for it, some who are absolutely against it, some who are absolutely against giving any kind of foreign aid to communist countries, some who would study and see if there is a basic human need, and a fifth, those others who would study and see if there's a human need, and they wouldn't care who it was as long as there was human need. What would be your position toward foreign aid?
Well, I can't put myself in any of those 5 categories. I'm sorry. I'd have to tell you what I think, which would be this. Now, I've traveled into Africa, into Asia, and into Europe, and I've had a chance to see, I think firsthand, quite a bit, not only what the United States is doing, but what Russia's doing, what Communist China is doing. And my opinion is that by far the most effective type of foreign aid is the technical assistance. The technical assistance. The Peace Corps, I think, has done more good for the United States overseas than probably most all the money we've sent over. You know how it is, if you have to be given some money from somebody, sometimes you resent that very person for giving you the money. But if you have somebody come along and say, here's my hand, I want to help you up, I want to help you yourself, and I'm going to give you my energy and my efforts to help you help yourself, then you really appreciate that. It means something to you. And I found in all the countries that I went to that the Peace Corps was by far the most effective type of assistance that we could give, technical assistance. Many of these nations are trying to telescope themselves into the 20th century from centuries and centuries of backwardness. And in a country like Ethiopia, over half the teachers in all the schools in Ethiopia are Americans. Now, you can't tell me that this isn't going to have a profound effect in shaping the democratic ideas of the country of Ethiopia in the future, because these people were taught, they lived it, by Americans who were committed to helping them help themselves. So the essence of what I would say is that the best type of assistance is that type of assistance which is there to help the people help themselves. I think that there has been wasted money in foreign aid. We've seen this in many different areas. At the same time, there have been great successes in foreign aid. Many experts say that the Marshall Plan, right after World War II, saved Europe from going communist. And of course, Western Europe is now prospering very greatly. And this has been a very, very effective example of where foreign aid has been successful. But foreign aid is, I guess, like everything else, human beings and politics and things in general, and that is there's good and there's bad, and there are all sorts of shades of gray in between, and there's very little that's black and white in foreign aid. But the main point I would make is that technical assistance is the key.
Anyone else have any questions in the house? Bob Cole? While Bob's coming up, I might ask you, Jed, one question. I'd like to know your position on the administration's War on Poverty bill.
I would support it.
Jed, most of these can be answered pretty quickly. One thing I was curious about is whether or not you favor the proposed medical care plan under Social Security.
This is a tough one, Bob, to answer quickly because there's so many different proposals made. I've been reading through the congressional record, and there's the Ribicoff Amendment, there's the Javits Amendment, there's the Long Amendment, and there's so many different proposals, it is a little difficult. I would like to make a few comments about this. One is that I'm going to take a poll of all the districts on all of these issues to try and get a consensus of opinion to use as a guideline in my own voting in the Congress, because I'm a very keen believer in representative democracy. The second thing I would like to say is that the Kerr-Mills bill has not been effective. There are only 33 states that are using it. Of this, 4 states represent 76% of the total usage of it, and of course you have to take the pauper's oath to utilize it. And I think there is going to be some type of change, but specifically what, it's hard to know. The advantage of having Social Security, or having the plan which provides, of course, not for the doctor's care, but for hospitalization and for nursing care under Social Security, is that you pay as you go. This gets back to deficit spending. The Kerr-Mills proposal, of course, is a deficit spending proposal. This comes from the general tax revenue, and it is not a pay-as-you-go plan, which the King-Anderson bill is. So there is a real advantage to that.
Are you in favor of retaining that portion of the Taft-Hartley Act which allows the states to vote on right-to-work legislation?
I haven't studied this issue at all, Bob, and I just wouldn't be prepared to comment on it.
Are you in favor of legislation which prohibits the federal courts from taking action in state apportionment questions?
I have said yes publicly before that I will support Carl Albert's proposal. I'm going to represent the 6th District of Oklahoma. I'm going to do what I think is in the best interest of the 6th District. Now, if I were representing Oklahoma City, to be very honest with you, I'd vote the other way. But I'm representing the 6th District, and it's in the best interest of the 6th District to support this Albert legislation.
It seems that our position in Southeast Asia has been questioned by many people. I wondered what steps you would advocate, if any, which would more effectively stop the spread of communism in that area. The question of Southeast Asia, I wanted to do that in steps in mind we did advocate in order to stop the spread of communism in that area.
Well, you know, if you have any ideas, I'll be glad to take them to Washington with me. Very seriously. I am not an expert on what's going on there. I think that the Johnson administration has made it very clear we're there to help the people in South Vietnam to maintain their freedom and to have a chance to build up a democratic system there. And we're determined to see that the communists do not run over South Vietnam, and I completely support President Johnson in this. I think that President Johnson and the Battle of Tonkin Bay and having the fighters respond to hitting the PT boat harbors there made it very clear that the United States is not prepared to tolerate any type of this type of aggression over there. And I think the American public, and certainly I, supported this action. And I think we're doing all we can, and I would continue to support doing the best possible job over there. I don't have any specific ideas. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on that.
Any other questions? Anyone else? Mr. Johnson, you said a moment ago if you were in Oklahoma City, you would vote differently. I would like to ask you a question or so about your basic philosophy of this word representation. Will you if you are elected to the House of Representatives, vote your convictions, or will you vote the polls that you will take among your people?
Thank you for bringing that out, because I think that's a very key question. What I'm going to do, and I believe that from my experience in government that this works best, is that I'm going to take a poll of all the districts on all the major issues. And I have found that as I did, at least student body president of the University of Oklahoma, that I agreed 99% of the time with the majority of these polls. And I think I will again with the people of the 6th District. I am going to try and use these polls as a guideline and follow them to vote the wishes of the majority of the people whenever in good conscience I can. Now, there may be an issue that will come up that the people of the 6th District, the polls will say 60% against such a piece of legislation or for such a piece of legislation, 40% the other way, and I'll vote in opposition to the poll. But when I do, I'm going to let people know it publicly, and I'm going to tell them why. And then, of course, it's my job to come back to you, the people who are hiring me as your hired hand in Washington, to say, well, now look, I know that you didn't vote for this in the poll. I voted for it in Congress, and this is why. And then, of course, it'll be up to the people either to send me back or not. But they'll know, people here will know where I stand and why I stand on the thing, and they'll also know what the majority of the people of the district favored. But in general, I think that my opinions would coincide very closely with the majority of those polls. But again, I would be prepared to stake my political future if I think an issue is that important to do so.
The administration has proposed revoking, I believe, the McCarran Immigration Act. Are you familiar with this act whereby we have limited immigration at the present time? The president is in favor of revoking this. Are you familiar with it? And would you favor it?
I'm really not familiar with this proposal, Bob. I'm sorry.
All right, I think that about takes care of the question, unless anyone else. Mr. Wade Watson has a question this time. Wade?
I don't have a question that I would like to ask Jed, but I would like to say this. I've received one of the highest recommendations anyone could possibly receive about Jed. My oldest daughter, Carolyn, went to school with him, and she thinks he's one of the finest young men she's ever known. Very capable, energetic, honorable, and single. But I would like to say this, Jed, because I think it's the basic thing that's on the minds of everyone here today, and probably in the minds of most Americans, and that is that we're interested in integrity in government. And I don't think that you'll find the people in Tillman County or the 6th District argue with you when you come to a true and honest conviction of what you think is best for our country in voting. And being a young man, I would forecast that you will be in the halls of Congress a long time. You will make integrity the primary principle on which you base your office.
Thank you very much. Can I just say thank you? I appreciate your kind prediction very much, Mr. Wade, and the comments that Carolyn made. I might say Carl Albert the other day in Washington predicted to the group that I was going to be in Congress 55 years. So I got a kick out of that. When I started running, they say, well, you're so young, you could be in Congress 20 years and be a committee chairman in your 40s. And then after I won, they said, well, you might stay in Congress 40 years. And now, of course, people are realizing that I really am quite young, and Carl Albert said 55, so I think that's about as high as it can go. But I do want to say thank you, gentlemen, very much for your patience and your kindness. It's very nice to be here with you. I'm sure that we don't all agree on everything, but that's the greatness of our political system, is that we don't have to. And I'd like to also thank the radio audience for listening in. Well, I have a 5-minute summation. My, that's wonderful. I don't know if I'd ever make a radio announcer or not. I would like to say, in terms of the summation, that I would like to go back to what I said in the beginning, and that is that I'm a Democrat. There are many of you here that are Republicans or that whose party affiliation would differ from mine, and this I appreciate and I respect. And the main point that I was trying to make in the earlier part of the interview is, I think, what Mr. Wade has said here at the end, and that is that people are interested in honesty and integrity in government. They want people who are there to serve the people and to serve all the people to the best of their ability. Now, I'm not perfect, and I'm not going to satisfy everybody, and I know it. But I am going to try and do the best job I know how. This I pledge you. And I'm not going to Washington to try and get something out of the till or try and get something for myself or try and gain something. I'm going there because I honestly and sincerely believe that I can be of service to people and to the country, and I want to try and be. I was brought up, and I was very fortunate to have been brought up by a man who believed in this type of statesmanship, and I think it is statesmanship. And that is that public service, possibly next to the ministry, is the highest calling a man can have, and that is to go to work in politics. And it's not an easy life, and I'm not kidding myself. I've seen it, and I've campaigned myself now, and it is hard, it's rough, and it's tough. And you have feelings, and you don't like to be called a member of the Garden Birch Society, or you don't like to be called a communist, or you don't like to be called things that you're not. You're a human, and you have feelings, and you resent this. And it's not an easy way to make a living, but it's a necessary way. Because in our system of government, unless we as individuals, unless each of you as individuals, unless everybody's listening on the radio as an individual, participates in our governmental process to the best of his ability, then there is no participation. Because unless individuals participate, there is no one participating at all. And our whole system of government is based upon the fact that individuals can govern themselves. This was the greatness of the American dream, is that free men are capable of governing themselves. And this is the first time in human history that man has been capable or has proved his capability. It's been since our age has come about. And the American Revolution, I think, is the inspiration now, and I hope that we will set the model for mankind throughout the world. We face a great challenge internationally of international communism, and this says that man is there to serve the state. We say that the state is here to serve the man, and I'm a very keen believer in this. And I think that unless individuals do get involved and do participate, that we can sit back and watch our democracy fade away. And I'm a concerned individual who is committed to the democratic traditions of our country, is committed to the concept of our Declaration of Independence, of our Constitution, of all the great hopes and aspirations and dreams that the American way of life have meant to so many people, not only in our country but abroad. And I might mention one of the things I'll never forget from traveling overseas in West Africa last summer. I met a young leader that will be, I'm sure, a member of Parliament of that country before long. And he said to me, you know, Jed, the thing that I want most of all for my country is that someday it may be like America. This was his vision as a young African, that his country someday might be like America, that he might have, and his country might share in the economic prosperity, the type of prosperity that we have, the type of freedom, the type of diversity with unity that we still have. The fact that we can sit here and debate in this room and discuss issues and disagree, but still all go out as Americans and as friends and not question the intentions or the motivation or the good faith of the other fellow. And this is the greatness of our system, and this is what I believe in, and I'm prepared to fight for it, and I will be in Washington fighting for you and fighting for all the people in this district, trying to continue and preserve the great heritage we have and strengthen it. And I want to thank you very much.